Hey everyone, this is Nathan Cross checking in, and for today's episode of Healthline, today I'm going to be talking about the science behind muscle contractions. So this is just a reminder to those who have already seen some of my videos, many of the videos part of the Healthline series, so welcome back, and to those new to the channel, welcome to Nathan Cross Training and the Healthline series as a whole, that it's best recommended to look at your body as a hierarchy of organization. And in order to understand how muscle contractions work, we're going to be looking at things from the molecular level predominantly. But first things first, let's consider our muscles. Our muscles, to start off with, contain many cells. Now these cells can also be known as muscle fibers, or specifically the scientific term myocytes. The muscle cell is a tubular-like cell, unlike many other cells you may be associated with, like a red blood cell or other cells in our body. So our myocytes are muscle fibers. They're tube-like shaped cells. They contain what we call myofibrils. Now these myofibrils contain many contractile protein filaments. And these protein filaments are molecules of actin and myosin. These protein filaments of actin and myosin are organized into something called sarcomeres, and these sarcomeres are connected end to end within each myofiber. Now, as I've mentioned before, cells are very small, so this is what would allow for our sarcomeres to be in the numbers of about 10,000 repeated groupings of our actin-myosin filaments, so 10,000 sarcomeres in a single myofibril, and then up to 1,000 myofibrils in a single muscle cell. From the macro level to the micro level, our muscle, being a connective tissue made up of myocytes, or individual muscle fibers or muscle cells. Those muscle cells are composed of myofibrils, and those myofibrils are composed of individual repeated groupings of actin-myosin filaments, being sarcomeres. Now, as for a quick disclaimer, it's important to realize that not all of the muscles or types of muscle in our body are broken down or will organize into sarcomeres. We have different kinds of muscle in our body. So we have smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, and cardiac muscle. You're probably looking or most interested in skeletal muscle right now, the ones, in our arms and legs and whatnot. Cardiac muscles, the muscles in our hearts, and smooth muscles, the ones you can, sort of associate with being inside of your blood vessels, inside of hollow organs like your stomach, your intestines, your bladder, and things of that nature. So skeletal muscle, that is what we call striated muscle, because sarcomeres, when looking at this muscle under a microscope, that's what gives the striated, striped appearance, the division of these sarcomeres within the myofibrils. So if we know that actin and myosin filaments, these protein filaments, make up the sarcomeres in skeletal muscle, we can take that previous model that we discussed before, we can sort of flip that over and expand that for a little bit more detail. So for this model, we're going to be going from the micro level to the macro level. We've got our actin-myosin filaments. Those are what make up our sarcomeres. Our sarcomeres, chained end to end, are what make up our myofibrils, and these myofibrils are packed together like a can of sausages side by side. You can probably see this in the image there. These myofibrils are contained within our muscle cells or muscle fibers, and then that's ultimately what makes up our muscle as a whole, the muscle tissue. ATP is the energy molecule that fuels our cellular processes. Regardless of whether or not we're exercising or doing any type of movement in everyday life that requires the use of our muscles. Now, what I say next is sort of the key that brings everything together, so pay close attention. During the actual muscle contraction, the myosin filaments within each sarcomere reacts with the available ATP. It takes the energy from that last phosphate groups, again chemical reactions occurring, and it conducts or will perform something called a power stroke. This power stroke is where the myosin filaments, the ends of the myosin filaments, grab onto the surrounding actin filaments and brings them towards the center of the sarcomere. Calcium, something that many of you may be familiar with, also needs to be present, specifically calcium ions, but calcium as a whole needs to be present for this contraction to occur. Calcium is what allows the myosin filaments to grab onto the surrounding actin filaments and brings them towards the center of the sarcomere. And once this reaction is over, it's the lack of ATP. So once ATP, that last phosphate group, is burned out, we have the sarcomere returning to its original shape after the myosin heads have released the actin filaments. So just for an overview of that last part, our myosin filaments react with ATP. It needs the energy from ATP in order to move, in order for the heads of myosin to grab onto the surrounding actin filaments. It needs calcium in order to grab onto those as another part of the reaction. It brings those actin filaments towards the center of the sarcomere. Each sarcomere end is what we call a Z-line. So you can probably see this in the diagram. The Z-lines become closer together in a contracted muscle, and once they become further apart, that is when the muscle is relaxed. That is the overall muscle contraction. We have the sarcomere shortening resulting in an overall shortening of our myofibril. Happening in all of our myofibrils is what results in the entire cell shortening, the entire muscle tissue as a whole. That is how that muscle is contracted. That is how our muscles contract. And it's all interesting because there's a topic like this that helps you to realize that this isn't necessarily as complicated as it is complex. Of course, there's a bunch of terminology that takes the time to understand and remember as far as biology and just general anatomy goes, but it's the complexity of the issue because there's so many different levels to how our muscles work. Again, the hierarchy of organization that I'm always talking about, looking at things from the atomic level to molecular level, all the way up to the tissue level, organ level, and system level. So just trying to take some time to understand this stuff is probably one of the best things that you can do for yourself. I hope you found this episode of Healthline useful. If you have any other recommendations on videos, on things you want me to talk about, make sure to leave that in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys next time. This is Nathan Cross checking out. Peace. Barely 17 with a pocket full of hope, screaming dollar in a dream with my closet looking broke and my niggas looking clean, getting caught up with that dope. Have you ever served a fiend with a pocket full of soap? Nigga, I can tell you things that you probably shouldn't know. Have you ever heard the screams?